All right, welcome to the morning walk. This is our first interview as a part of our interview series. I'm here with Blaine Donoho. Blaine is the director of strength and conditioning at Goodpasture Christian School. It's about 15 minutes north of Nashville, around Madison, Tennessee. And Blaine is actually a good friend. He was once my boss, and now I'm kind of like a father figure to him.
Oh,
So,
wow.
Blaine, how you doing, man?
Oh, I'm good, Keegan. I'm good, Keegan. Listen, I just appreciate all your advice and your leadership in this life that you've given me now that apparently you're my father figure at this point in time, Keegan. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, I understand. It's how it goes. It's just
Oh,
how
yeah.
I'm viewed.
Oh, is that right? Wow. Okay. I haven't heard that one before, except from anyone but you. But hey, let's keep it rolling. Let's keep it rolling.
Let's keep it rolling. So, director of strength and conditioning, kind of explain more of what you do on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, so here at Goodpasture Christian School, we do have strength conditioning classes in school. So it's a great opportunity for our athletes. It's awesome that I'm blessed enough to be at a school that puts our program on such a pedestal,
Mhm.
because there's definitely schools out there that one either don't even know about strength conditioning or the ins and outs of it, or two know about it but don't really care enough about it to put a priority on it in any way, shape, or form. Luckily, I'm not at a school like that. They put a lot of priority in our program, and like I said, it's been a blessing. So basically, what the day generally looks like, and of course, it changes season to season, time of year, quarter to quarter, depending on what teams are in season, out of season, things of that nature. But what the day to day generally looks like is I'll get to school around 6:30 in the morning, give or take. Usually, I have some guys or girls come to the weight room before school. That's strictly voluntary. We're we've created a culture over the past. This is my third year at Good Pasture. We've created a culture there where the kids have learned to kind of enjoy the weight room, not only see the benefits of it, but just actually like to be in the weight room, which has been great to see. Of course, not every single kid is like that, and that's fine. But luckily, we've created an environment where it is a pretty enjoyable space for most. So we do have voluntary athletes come early in the morning to get a little bit extra work in or do a little bit of mobility work. There's different needs, different specifications as to why they come, but I usually get there around 6:30 with school starting at 7:50, to allow those voluntary athletes to come in and do whatever they do before school. Then I teach three classes. I guess you can call them classes. Really, they're just training sessions. But I have three training sessions throughout the day, each lasting about an hour, give or take. Um, and so I'll have one in the morning, two in the afternoon after lunch. Those training sessions consist of a mixed match of athletes, male and female. There will be multiple teams in there at one time for the most part. Every once in a while, we'll get a specific team in there, but usually the individualized teams come after school. So I've got the three training sessions during the day, every day. And then after school, again, this is a little bit dependent on the time of year and who's in season and out of season, like I said. But after school, we have a training session most days. Like I said, usually for individual teams, and like I said, those individual teams just depend on the time of year. So all in all, you're looking at getting there around 6:30 for the most part. On an average day, leaving around 4:30, maybe 5 at the latest if I don't have a game to go to or something like that.
Do you feel like since Good Pasture puts an emphasis on strength and conditioning, does that give you as a school an edge in your sports? Do you feel like that's a benefit?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, and of course, I'm biased. I wouldn't do what I do if I didn't think it didn't give us an edge in some way. But yeah, I mean, I'd say for sure, especially in the division of sports that we play in, we're in arguably, especially in football, we're in arguably one of the best divisions in Tennessee high school football. And then in terms of general athletics, we're in one of the best divisions in the state as well. So our football is actually a division up compared to the rest of our sports. Don't ask me the details on that. I wish we weren't, but it is what it is. We play with the cards we're dealt, right? But yeah, I mean at that level, being in, we're not in Metro Nashville, but we're right outside of it. So we're playing the private schools that are in the center of Nashville, in all the very, very wealthy areas of Nashville. So in order to compete with schools like that, who maybe some of them are the same size as us, most of them are a lot larger than us, and have a lot more athletes to pick through. We have to have programs in place, such as strength conditioning, such as speed, agility, change of direction work, that is organized and, you know, knowledgeable in the way that it's programmed, in
Mm.
order to even just compete. And we've had relative success. I mean, we've been, like I said, we've been very blessed the past 3 years that I've been there. We've won a few state championships in some sports. We've had a few runner-ups in some sports. We've had a few third place trophies in some sports. So
Mm.
we've had some pretty good general success over the past 3 years. And of course, I'm biased, but I think I'm not the only one that would say that the strength conditioning program in general has played a part, in that success. And that's not even just to say that that's because of me.
Mm.
Our athletes do a really, really good job at taking the prescription that I've given them. I tell them all the time, I can put up on that TV a workout for you to do, or I can put up on a whiteboard what I want you to do, and I can explain it to you. I can show you how to do it properly, and I can tell you exactly how I want it done. But ultimately, at some point in time, I'm going to turn my back to you, and it's going to be your decision on whether or not you do it to the level that I know you can and that you know you
Mhm.
can. So at that point, I've given you a prescription, but you don't have to take it, or you can halfway take it if you want to. So that all just depends on them. And overall, our athletes do a really good job at taking that prescription to the max intent that they possibly can. So that a lot of that is just fully 100% up to them, and they've taken advantage of it.
Yeah. You mentioned culture. The weight room has a certain culture. How do you go
Hmm.
about developing a culture of enjoyment and of persistence and resilience in the weight room?
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough, and I'm a full believer that this is not just at the high school level or in the field of strength conditioning, but with
Mhm.
any job, any situation, scenario. When building a culture, it's all going to be situational, right? You got to know the people you're working with. You got to know the athletes you're working with. And I would even argue and say that in my setting, at least, that could change every year. Um, Athletes change as seniors graduate and freshmen come in. Attitudes change, teams
Mhm.
change. Standards have to stay the same to an extent, though, right? I think that's a big culture builder. This is something that I've gradually gotten better at over the past 3 years. I'm not sitting here saying that I'm proficient at it yet. I've got a lot of work to do on this, but it is something I try to work really hard at and be better at, because I think it would make me a better coach, and is making me a better coach. But you have to stick to your standards, right? At the beginning of the year, I sit down all of my group, every single team, every single athlete, and I throw up a slideshow, and it's like a 3 slide slideshow, right? And all it says on there are the rules of the weight room. This is just the general rules. I don't want you wearing Crocs in the weight room. I don't want you doing things like that. Let's not be dumb, basically. And I'm just telling you this because I have to, right? That's
Mhm.
what all that is. But the most important slide out of all of them is the standard for the weight room. And the standard for the weight room, the number one standard, and I make sure the athletes know this, the number one standard is, as long as you come in here knowing that you have signed up, voluntarily signed up by signing up to play the sport, you have voluntarily signed up to do a job. And your job is to come in here and give me your best effort and give me your max intent that you can that day on this workout for the hour that you're in here. You've done your job. And that's the standard, right? That's the standard. And so as long as I'm holding you to that standard, and you're holding yourself to that standard, I mean, that alone creates culture. But you can't waver from the standard once it's created, right?
Mm.
Once you set the standard, once your athletes agree on the standard, because I get us all to agree. I explain the standards, and I get us all to raise our hands and say, do we understand this? Do we have any questions on this? Do we have any concerns about this? Do you think this should be different in any way? And if so, why? Let's talk about it. I give them the opportunity to explain to me what their doubts are, what their concerns are about it, right? And if there's not any, I get them to say, do we agree? We all agree? Perfect. This is what we're doing moving forward. So don't get upset with me if I hold you to it, because
Mm.
this is the standard you've agreed on and I've agreed on. So I think that's a big part of the culture. And the other part that kind of follows alongside that is the detail aspect, right? And this comes with the intent of doing your job well, right? Again, this goes hand in hand here. Uh, I see a term thrown around a lot in my field of mental toughness, right?
Mm.
Mental toughness is kind of this coined term that not only in the field of strength conditioning, but just in the field of athletics has been coined by a lot of coaches, by a lot of programs. We all want to be mentally tough, right? And coaches have different ways of getting their athletes mentally tough, right?
Mm.
Unfortunately, for some coaches, that means I'm going to run my athletes into the dirt until they puke because that's mental toughness, right? Um, I don't really subscribe to that. That's not really the camp I'm in. I think we're smarter than that at this point in time, in this day and age of sports. And I think kids are smarter than that, especially at the high school level. My form of mental toughness is if we have a dynamic effort bench press, which for those of you who don't know, dynamic effort means you're typically going to be using a lighter weight and it's going to be moving really, really fast. We're working on power development here in terms of dynamic effort. Okay. And we're blessed enough in our weight room to have velocity based training, VBT for short, which it's just a device that measures the speed of the bar in terms of velocity, which is in meters per second, right? So if I tell an athlete, all right, this is a dynamic effort bench press, means this has got to move really, really fast. I want you to move this weight for 5 sets of 3 reps between 0.85 and 0.95 meters per second, which they'll get instant feedback with every single rep that they move because of the VBT device, right? So they know exactly how fast they're moving it. There's no guessing there, right? If I say, I want you to do 5 sets of 3 between 0.85 and 0.95, right? Is that athlete going to stay there? Are they
Mm.
going to pick a weight that is going to be between 0.85 and 0.95? Because this is what's going to happen, right? What's going to happen is an athlete is going to either be way too light and they're going to be moving that bar at 1.15 meters per second, which is way too fast, right? Or they're going to try to ego lift a little bit and they're going to be moving that bar way too slow at 0.65 meters per second, but that's not the required range, right? That's not the goal I want for the day. I gave them a range for a reason. I've explained to them the reason as to why this is power development. This is the range I need you to be in order to accomplish the goal of the day. And so the culture aspect comes in when it comes to the fact of how mentally tough are you going to be to check your ego at the door when you know you are not doing the required weight, the required speed, the required sets and reps of the workout? Are you going to be able to check your ego and do what you know you should do to reach that point? Or are you just going to keep doing what you want to do because that's what you want to do? Right.
Mm.
And that's the biggest culture thing for me. That's true mental toughness to me because we've got tons of kids that love to lift heavy weight, right? It's fun to lift heavy weight, especially if you're pretty good at it, right? We've got a lot of other kids that don't care anything about lifting heavy weight and they just kind of want to scrape through the workout without really being noticed and not really hurting that much or straining that
Mm.
much, right? So you got both ends of the spectrum. Are you going to be able to push yourself one way or the other to meet the goal of the day when I'm giving you all the feedback and all the clues and the answers to reach that goal? How mentally tough are you going to be in that moment? And that to me is the correct culture. That to me is mental toughness.
Mm. Yeah, there sounds like there's external and internal factors. I wrote down
Sure.
external factors, you have your boundaries and
Mhm.
the expectations that are set, along with the accountability from you, the person setting the culture. But then they have to be attentive to detail, as well as have self-awareness around, am I trying my hardest? Am I pushing myself? Or am I just kind of sitting back and letting the workout come to me almost? I'm not attacking it like
Yep.
I ought to be. That's what I
Yep.
heard in that.
Yeah, and it all comes full circle, right? You do the 5 sets of 3 between 0.85 and 0.95 or whatever I said as my example. You do that in the way that I expect you to do it with the max intent that you can do it.
Mm.
Well, good job. You accomplished the gold standard of our weight room of doing your job at the max intent that you can possibly do it that day. So you did it. You did it. We're never going to have problems as long as you give me that every single day. And for some athletes, that's harder than others. But the ones that truly buy into that from the very beginning, they see the most progress, and they're the most bought in teams, and they're the most bought in athletes. And crazy how it works, but they're usually the ones winning games. So yeah, I mean, it all comes full circle. That's why I give the gold standard for the standard of the weight room of just come in and do your job with max intent every single day, and we'll be good with the rest of the stuff.
Hmm. This next question can be physical or mental, but how do you help students prepare for what they're doing now in their sport and for what's next after high school?
Mm. So that's a pretty interesting question because at this high school level, um, they could leave high school and do all kinds of different things, right? You have such a variety of kids you're working with, especially in the public setting. Public setting meaning, at a school rather than a private sector working one-on-one in my field. Those are the two primary, uh, I guess, routes you can go in the field of strength conditioning is public or private. And so in this public setting, working with hundreds of kids, hundreds of athletes from freshman to senior, male and female, you've got the ones that their goal is to play collegiate sports, right? That is their goal. That is what they're working towards, and they're going to do whatever they can to get there, right? But on the flip side, you've also got the ones that they're playing their sport because they want to have something to do, right? They don't want to just sit at home all day. And that's fine too. That's fine. That's great. I encourage it, right? So it's a tough question in the sense of how do you help these kids get to where they want to go when there's so many different goals in one singular room in one singular team, right?
Hmm.
And I guess I'll go with the physical side first. Is I want you to fall in love in some way, shape, or form with the process of becoming physically healthy, right?
Hmm.
Physically healthy is always the main goal because sports are going to end eventually, whether that's the second you walk the stage your senior year or whether that's, you know, 15 years down the road when your professional career is over, sports will end, right? Your life is as long as you can make it, hopefully, right?
Hmm.
So that physical health aspect is something that you got to fall in love with early. And I think if you do fall in love with it early, you're going to live a much happier, healthier, and just generally better life. So that's my number one goal for in terms of physical, and I guess a little bit mental too, right? I mean, there's a lot of internal factors that play into that too. But I want our kids to not dread coming into the weight room because I truly believe that will help them stay in a weight room voluntarily by themselves when they
Hmm.
leave my weight room, or when they leave Goodpasture Christian School, right? Which again will help them regardless of whether they're playing a college sport or not, right? But in terms of my collegiate level athletes, um, I have to not only help them develop a love for their own physical health and well-being, but also develop a love of, like I previously talked about, intent and competition, right?
Hmm.
They have to realize the benefits of the weight room, and that's on me. That's on me as a coach to help them realize that, right? I can't just be like, okay, well, just do this workout, and I mean, like, after a couple weeks you should like it, right? You should want to come back and do more, right? No, like it's completely on me to make sure they're in a situation where they can see progress. I'm a big rank, record, and publish type of guy, meaning we
Hmm.
do a lot of testing, right? I test sprints, I test verts, I test broads, I have maxes for certain ranges of velocity. We talked about the meters per second thing. I don't have just a bench max. I have a bench max in the range of zero point 0.3 to zero point 0.4 meters per second, zero point 0.5 to zero point 0.6 meters per second, 7.5 to 8.5, 9.5 to or 9.0 to 1.0. Like I have all these different maxes and metrics for these athletes to make sure they see every single little bit of progress they make, whether that's a week to week progress, month to month progress, or year to year progress, they're seeing the progress. And that is going to be something that helps them buy in to the process because they're not going to be able to buy into the process if they don't see progress. That's not going to happen. Even with the most fiery competitors, it's not going to happen, right? So they have to see the progress, and it's my responsibility as the coach to make sure they see that progress, because that's what's going to help them buy in to everything that we do, which in turn is going to help them buy into everything they do post high school. Talking about a collegiate level athlete. right?
Mm.
So not only are they going to enter into college in a better standing because they've bought in for 4 years in high school, but now they're also going to create that same form of buy-in that's already adapted, right? It's also muscle memory at this point. They're going to carry that into their collegiate level program, which is already going to put them on top compared to others, right?
Mm.
Um, so I mean, yeah, other than that, I mean, I think that's a pretty common goal for the collegiate level athlete, the non-collegiate level athlete. But again, it's tough. It's tough considering you have such a wide variety of personalities and goals in one room.
Yeah, there's definitely complexity with you having to manage students who are really intent on this is what I want to do for my life versus
Hmm.
students who are this is what I want to do now, but I don't
Yeah.
really want to do this after. So you
Hmm.
have to balance that. I like what you put of I want them to fall in love with being physically healthy first. That's the
Hmm.
baseline. And after that, with the other students, there's another level to it, and probably in college there's another level to it.
Hmm.
So I think that was well put.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's all a game of filling buckets in this
Mm.
field, right? Physically, you want to fill buckets, right? If they're in season, right, you got to know exactly what they're doing in season from a physical standpoint.
Hmm.
So when they come to you in season, you can use your time to fill the buckets that aren't getting filled in practice or in games or whatever that may be. But it's also filling buckets in terms of mentally too, right?
Hmm.
It's filling these buckets that lead to, if they don't care about their physical health, well, we got to fill that bucket because filling that bucket is going to lead to them being a little bit more competitive in the weight room, which could lead to them understanding and discovering a fact that they enjoy the weight room, which could
Hmm.
lead to them ending up, pushing a little bit harder in the weight room, which could lead to this and this and this. You got to fill buckets. And so that's the main goal is we're trying to fill each bucket that's not being filled. And once that bucket's full, we're going to carry it over and let it overflow into the next bucket.
Yeah. So this goes kind of back to your mental toughness talk. But my question was when you think about the current culture that students are living in, what they're going to be journeying into, how do you help students become mentally tough for that world ahead? And this can be for sports or not for
Mm.
sports.
Yeah, and again, I find it very challenging. I'll be completely transparent with you. One of the biggest challenges in my job today is there's such a generational gap between the high school age kids now and me. And I'm only, I turned 27 this month. I'm
Hmm.
not that far removed from high school. Like, I mean, I'm only 10 or 8, 9 to 14 years older than some
It's
of these
pretty old.
kids.
That's pretty
Uh,
old.
yeah,
So
well,
you're an
I'm
old
not,
man now.
I'm still a spring chicken, Keegan. I'm still a spring chicken. But the fact of the matter is, I wasn't in high school that long ago, right?
Hmm.
But the world is just so different. The world's so different now than what it was even when I was in high school. And I understand that, in this generation of kids, like I'm in the same legalistic generation, right?
Hmm.
But everything's just so different. And these kids respond to things so differently than my generation, meaning when I was in high school, they respond so differently than we did.
Hmm.
And so it's tough. It's tough. Because, and of course, every kid's different too. Um, but in terms of mental toughness, it's going to lead into their life outside of high school. Um, again, I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that they have to understand that they're not going to be given anything if they really want to earn something, right? And I think in a world full of instant gratification, that's tough for them to understand. And
Hmm.
it's frustrating for me sometimes because like I can't really get it every once in a while. Like some of these kids, they don't really know true work ethic
Hmm.
because they've grown up, at least in the past 5, 6, 7 years, when their development has truly hit full force and they've got to see the world in a little bit of a more mature way. They've grown up in a world of somewhat instant gratification. You want something, you get it. You
Hmm.
need to find something out, you find it out. Like they can get everything at their fingertips within seconds for the most part, right?
Hmm.
And so sometimes I'll get frustrated because I'm like, guys, if you come into this weight room, if you come into this speed and agility session, if you come into whatever we're doing today, and you're not fully motivated to be the best you can be that day, you're not going to get out of it, and you can't be mad at me when you don't see the progress you're wanting to make. And it's like I can't get mad at them because they physically and mentally just don't understand it. Like they don't understand it because they've never had to go through something like that yet. Um,
Mm.
and so I think getting them to understand, if you really try to earn something, that's going to require struggle, and that's going to require strain, and that's going to require pushing past some barriers such as the bad day you just had, or the lack of sleep you just got last night, or the test you just felt like you bombed, or the girlfriend or boyfriend that just broke up with you 2 classes ago, or whatever, right? You have to be able to push past a couple of those things and move toward your ultimate goal for that day, which, like I said, is to do your job and give full intent at that job. And
Mhm.
I think once we get to the point where our athletes kind of understand that I'm only going to get as much as I give in this stuff, that's where true mental toughness for life in general is created. I know it's a little bit of a cliche thing to say, like, you do all the little things right, you do all the small details right, it's going to end up being a big deal for you. But like, I mean, there is some truth behind
Sure.
that. There is some truth behind that, right? And like, I know it's another cliche thing for someone on the athletic side of the world to be like, sports teaches you like the way of life. Like, sports teaches you a lot about the way to live and how to be and how to do. And I get it. Like, I get that that's a cliche, but there is truth behind it because we put our athletes in situations where they have to push past barriers in order to succeed. Mental barriers, physical barriers, emotional barriers, right? We put them in these situations and we teach them how to do it, but a lot of that, as you know, is self-taught and
Mm.
self-provoked to an extent. I mean, it's their job. It's their job, and I let them have full ownership of it, and I'm fully transparent with them about it and say, like, if you're not making the progress you think you should be making, maybe you should take a look at the amount of effort you're giving day in and day out and see if they can be reevaluated or readjusted. So again, talking about mental toughness, that's it for me at this day and age in this generation. If
Mm.
we can get them to fully grasp what it takes to actually earn and what it means to actually work towards a goal and the sacrifices that must be made to reach that goal, um, they'll reach mental toughness in their sport and in the longevity of their life afterwards, I believe.
Mm. Yeah, it seems like mental toughness is created by acceptance of where you are and what
Hmm.
you've done, and then that ownership piece. So now I have to take responsibility for my actions and what I'm doing, and I
Yeah.
have to trust the process, and I have to go through the little details.
Hmm.
But I also have to develop resiliency, and I have to learn how to bounce back and adapt. And I like ownership because I've been kind of doing research on the side about ownership and acceptance, and ownership always involves risk, but there's always reward as well. And
Yeah.
so I like that your idea is I have to teach them how to own their life themselves because given
Yeah.
it's a private school, they may be in a position where they might not have had to take ownership often.
Yeah. And this kind of goes back, I gave the example earlier of, some coaches believe that building mental toughness means after a bad game or when your team doesn't play well, you bring them in the next day and you run them into the dirt and you run them until they puke and things like that. And well, that's building mental toughness because it takes a mentally tough person to get through something like that, and then they'll never make those mistakes again because that's their punishment and they don't want to go through that
Mm.
punishment again. Well, my argument is, if you're trying to do what you just said, Keegan, and you're trying to help them create ownership of themselves and their responsibilities and their work ethic and their goals, right?
Mm.
If they're going to ever truly trust what you're telling them to do and trust that what you're saying is accurate, and they're going to respect when you're hard on them in the sense of you can be straight up with them and tell them, hey, I don't think you're giving quite the best effort you can today. And I'm going to need you to push a little bit harder because if you don't, you're not going to reach the
Mm.
goal that you and I both have for you, right? They're not going to respond to that if you're the type that builds mental toughness by putting them through turmoil, right?
Mhm.
When they don't perform well, right? they don't understand why they didn't perform well if you don't teach them why they didn't perform well. And they're
Mm,
not going to trust what you say and hear what you say if all they know you by is, well, he's just the coach that makes me hurt physically, mentally, and emotionally, right?
mm,
There's got to be a trust between you and the athlete. And again, this goes beyond sports, right? There's got to be a trust between you and whoever you're mentoring or leading or
mm,
working with if they're ever going to truly hear, listen, and apply what you tell them, right? And I would just argue and say that if you're doing things like that, like physically, mentally, or emotionally harming them in terms of punishment in order to quote unquote build them up, I don't subscribe to that because I think that's more just for you at that point.
mm,
That's more of you trying to assert your authority depending on the situation, or you just trying to make yourself feel better because you feel like you need to be a good coach and they didn't play well, so you gotta fix it, right? That's a you thing. That has nothing to do with them. You're not trying to make them better. You're trying to make yourself feel better at that point.
mm.
So maybe we need to take a lesson in mental toughness for yourself at that point. But yeah, that's just where I stand on that. And I think there's a time and place for physical punishment to an extent, but it's just I don't know. I get tired of hearing the whole mental toughness argument because I'm going to run my players into the dirt and make them cry. In terms of mental toughness, that it just bothers me.
Yeah, you'll appreciate this, but a lot of recent research has been around children and how they respond well to different situations where they've messed up, and they balanced it with what they call respectful parenting and authoritative parenting, but it was more so like the punishment style of like go to your room or here's a spanking, whatever it is.
Mm,
And they found that the children responded and actually learned a lot quicker in the respectful parenting situation because the parent took the time to actually explain to them what they
mm,
did wrong. They walked them through a scenario where they could try it again. And it was like by the third time in this scenario, the child had shown signs of learning it. And then by the fifth time, had learned it completely and had
mm,
stopped the behavior. When in the other one, the child actually began to act out even more.
mm,
And yeah, it seems like the punishment is a quick and easy way for me as the parent or me as the coach to be able to physically see them doing something that they deserve
yeah,
because of their behavior, as opposed to what you said, how can I teach them how to just do it better? Because that learning piece is going to be the most helpful.
yeah, yeah. No, I agree. Yeah, and like I said, I'm not saying some form of morality based physical punishment is there's not a time and place for that, right?
Mhm.
I think depending on the situation, there could be. Again, talking about in athletics in general, like I think there could be depending on the situation, but running your team to death or making them do up downs until they cry or puke or pass out or whatever, because they had a bad rep or a bad snap or a bad play or a bad game, that's just not it. It's just not it. We're so
Mm.
much smarter than that in today's world. And if you think we're not, then you're the problem. You're the
Mhm.
one not growing. You're the one not doing the research. You're the one not furthering your learning. Because we're just so much smarter as a society now. And the kids in this generation, at least at the age that I work with in the high school level, they don't respond well to that. At least most of them. So
Mhm.
yeah, it is what it is. But it's never something that you'll find me in the camp of. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I remember my basketball coach my senior year would not do punishment based exercises, but he would set expectations of if this person shoots two free throws and he misses one, we run one down and back.
Hmm.
And the idea was that the you miss free throws, it impacts the whole team.
Hmm.
And so he would put someone on the spot. And if they'd miss, we have to do it down and back. And that to me was more for the sake of us getting better. And
Mm.
that's kind of where that almost punishment style that you were talking about, I feel like that's more appropriate. But you're
Yeah,
right. If I had missed a free throw in a game and he just said, just run until
yeah,
I tell you to stop, just run.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
here's the other flip side of that too, right? And I like that approach. I really like that approach, right? That's kind of like one of those fine lines of, okay, yeah, maybe physical punishment might be acceptable, like, right?
Mm,
Because I mean, there's motivation behind that. Like there's team building and motivation and pressure involved with that, right? But here's the other thing that bothers me about the scenario I mentioned of, your players had a bad game, so you're going to run them into the dirt at the beginning of practice, right? What often happens after that, right? Your players are tired, they're fatigued, their central nervous system is absolutely shot, right? But then what do you do after that? You go through a practice. Well,
mm,
now they're going through a practice at what, 25%? And so now you're getting mad at them because the practice sucks. And it's just like, this is on you. Like, this is not your players. How do you expect
mm,
them to love the sport and play well for you when you're the one creating their downfall? Like,
mm,
how that doesn't work. That doesn't, we got to take the authoritative power trip position out of it and just look at it logically. If you want your players to perform well in practice, you can't destroy them at the beginning of the practice. If you want your players to play well in game, you got to make sure they're practicing with max intent and doing everything they can to make sure their practices resemble games in some way, shape, or form, right? This goes for any sport, right? And
mm,
the only way they're going to be able to practice at max intent and do everything you say to max intent is if they can perform at max intent or if they trust you. Both go hand in hand there, right? You just create a scenario where they don't trust you and they physically can't even perform for you. So you've set them up for failure. And so you can't expect them to learn when all you do is downgrade them.
mm.
So yeah, I mean, you can go. We can go down a rabbit hole about that for hours, but we can move on if you want to. But it's just obviously it's kind of a passionate area for me to talk about. It irks me. It really does.
Mm. No, I love it. Yeah, this next question, a little bit different, but what is the most enjoyable part of your job? Mm.
That's a loaded question right there. That's a loaded
Yeah,
question
I,
right
I
there.
honestly kind of asked it in a British accent too. So,
The most enjoyable part of my job. Um, I'll go. I'll go the cliche route first, the typical route, I guess you could say, and say that being able to see when an athlete realizes the progress they have made or the work that they have put in has paid off in some way.
mm,
That's the most enjoyable part of the job. That's what makes every single day, every single hour, every single minute spent worth it, is when an athlete of any kind, high level, low level, male, female, I don't care. When they see the work they've put in has made some type of progress, um, just the beam of their face and the glow that they get from that is awesome. Easily one of the most enjoyable parts of my job. From a day-to-day standpoint, I absolutely love the challenge of finding what best suits a team and their needs.
mm,
Every sport's different, every team's different. Every team is going to respond to certain exercises, to certain stimuli differently, right? And the fun part about it is every year is different. I kind of alluded to that earlier in the podcast. Like, as players come in and players go out and players move on, your team dynamic changes. Your capability and ability physically as a team changes, right?
mm,
Everything changes. And so finding not only the sets, the reps, the exercises, the X's and O's parts of it that best fits that team, but also finding the coaching style or the motivation style that best fits that team is super fun because it is
mm.
a challenge. It is a challenge. And I just like how it's constantly varied year in and year out and constantly varied with every team. So that part's really enjoyable in terms of day to day. I love that stuff.
Yeah, awesome. Next question is not about work, but
Okay.
it's about outside of work. So, outside of work, what are some of your hobbies and interests that you enjoy?
So I really, really enjoy. I grew up in Portland, Tennessee, which is just a small rural country town.
The
Uh,
backwoods.
it is. It is. It is a country town right. on the Kentucky and Tennessee line. I'm about 10 minutes from the Kentucky line in the house that I grew up in. But my family owns a nursery. My dad is the fourth generation owner of said nursery. And so I've been blessed and lucky enough to grow up around farmland and nursery stock and wooded areas and just love the outdoors just because that's where I spent my entire childhood.
Mm,
So I love going outside, being outside. I love hunting. Um, it's a great hobby of mine. I'm gonna do it tomorrow. Deer season just came about 2 weeks ago, and I haven't been able to go out yet, just due to work conflicts and things like that. So I'm super excited about that. We're on fall break now, so I get to do a little bit of deer hunting, and that's great. So I really enjoy that. Um, Also, in terms of being outside as well, love backpacking. I've got a
mm,
group of buddies that we usually try to go on one, two, maybe three backpacking trips a year. And so I was texting with one of my buddies that's in that group today, actually talking about a trip that we're trying to plan for about mid-November in a month or so. And so that's a ton of fun. Again, just being outside in general, especially this time of the year. Fall's my favorite season. Football, hunting, leaves changing colors, just the beauty of nature's God's creation in general. I just really enjoy being out there. It's kind of a dopamine hit for me a little bit. So anything outside is going to be preferred. Other than that, I mean, I kind of live out the stereotypical strength coach life of I really enjoy lifting weights.
mm,
So I'll work out 4 or 5 times a week, depending on the week, do my own thing. That's kind of again another cliche thing to say, but it's kind of my stress relief, my escape, where I don't have to think for an hour or so every day, and just to pick something up that's a little bit heavy and throw it around a little bit. That's fun to me. I've been doing that for shoot, I guess consistently for 11 or 12, 13 years now. So it's just become a part of my life now. So I do that a lot. Um, and then, yeah, I mean, other than that, I just enjoy playing sports and having fun. I'm not a great athlete, never have been a superb athlete of any kind. I'd say average at best. But I enjoy the competitiveness of sports. And so I like playing whatever is in front of me. And so a lot of my friends and I will get together and play pickup or I'll join a men's softball league here and there and do things like that. And so, yeah, I mean, I try to fill my free time with lots of physical activity and being outside. That's basically the gist of it.
mm. What's your favorite part of deer hunting?
Ooh. So I'm a little bit snobby when it comes to deer hunting. I'm one of the types that doesn't ever, no matter the type of year or the time of year. I mean, I never take a rifle out. I strictly bow hunt.
Mm,
And the reason why I strictly bow hunt is because it is uber challenging. It's really, really hard. You take a rifle out. I mean, you can smoke a deer from 150, 200 yards with a rifle if you're a pretty good shot. Which I mean, I'm not a bad shot, but I just don't have a desire to do that. That's not fun to me. That doesn't give me the same feeling as being on the ground in a ground blind or in a tree in a tree stand with a bow, knowing that I'm not going to take a shot unless it has to be a perfect shot for me to take one more than 30 yards out.
mm,
Because I'm also a pretty conservative hunter. I don't let arrows fly, as they say. I like to be as fair as possible to the animals. There's no chance I'm taking a shot unless I know for a fact it can be a kill shot. Because I feel like I owe that to the animal. So my friends get mad at me for it sometimes because they're like, bro, you haven't even killed one yet, and you only got a third of the season left. You had one within 50 yards. You should have just let it fly. But it's like I'm just not gonna do that. Like I like the strategy of it a little bit more. But my favorite part in general is the strategic aspect of it, right?
mm,
Um, and there's a lot to unpack with that in terms of strategy. It's not just the tracking and the prep work that goes before the season starts. It's more than that, right? It's strategy in the sense of you have to try to in some way outsmart this animal who I respect immensely and in a lot of ways I think is smarter than me, at least in the environment that the animal is in, because I'm in their home territory, right?
Mhm.
So uh, the strategy is really fun, it's really enjoyable, but then also just the respect in general is really enjoyable for me. And I feel like this is one reason why hunters in general kind of get a bad rap. Um, but not so much here in Tennessee. But maybe you go over to some of the liberalized parts of the country a little bit more and they get a bad rap because they think there's a lack of respect there. But the fact of the matter is, like, uh, I have so much respect for any deer that crosses my eyesight while I'm hunting them that I mean it's incredible. Like I can't even really describe it unless you've actually experienced it, but it sounds eerie, it sounds gory, but like the art of taking the life of something like that, there's so much emotion involved in that and so much respect that must be involved in that in order to do that properly, in my personal opinion. That I mean, like, I've teared up over animals before because a couple reasons. One, I'm a big animal lover. Like I don't want that to happen, but also two, I respect the animal so much and appreciate what that animal is providing for me and my family in terms of food, that it's just such an emotional experience. So that would be my favorite part, just the strategy involved in it, and then just the uber amounts of respect that you have to have in order to be, in my opinion, a good hunter or a proper hunter. Let's put it that way. It's
Mhm.
just it makes it super enjoyable for me.
So where do you fall in line of the argument of God did not design animals to be killed? Where do you fall in line with that? I'm curious on your thoughts.
Oh, geez. I mean, I think that that argument is. Hmm, I think you can find specifications in the Bible that could argue against that, in that term of God didn't design them to be killed. I don't know about that just because I feel like you see plenty of examples. Now I do understand in Genesis it says, you know, again, this is paraphrasing. I can't remember the exact verbiage of the verses and things like that. But in Genesis it says like, when God created Adam and Eve and the earth and the plants, that God created the plants, the herbs, right, to provide food for Adam and Eve. And I do understand that argument. I think that's an Old Testament based argument. And I think in the New Testament, you can kind of see that shift just a little bit. We don't have to go down that rabbit hole, but um, I don't know. Like, I've never actually been asked that question before, to be honest
Hmm.
with you, Keegan. But my thought process is if you are like me and have so much respect for God's creation that I do, and you truly take that animal's life for the purpose of your own nourishment, it's hard for me to understand why God would be upset about that in any way. It's hard for me to understand why God would create that in order with without that in mind, at least. But again, not gonna lie, that's a hard question for me to answer. I've never been asked it before, so props to you on that one.
Maybe came to my head. We'll move on though. My next question is another one I always like to hear an answer to. So if you could tell 10 years ago you a few pieces of advice,
Hmm.
what advice would you give almost 17-year-old Blaine Donoho?
Ooh, my advice would be patience is key. All right, don't come to conclusions too quickly. Um, I when I was younger, especially going through middle school and into high school, struggled a lot with OCD and things like that. And that kind of shifted in as I got into a little bit of older age. That kind of shifted into just a general worrying about everything. even the things that weren't worth worrying about. And so that led to me coming to conclusions that some were valid, most of them weren't. And I, I didn't have much patience in terms of life. So patience is a virtue, and that would be a big piece of advice I would give myself going into the future, knowing that 10 years ago I was 17 years old, about to enter into college and on my own per se. So patience is a big one. Um, Another big one for me would be learning. Um, Open my mind up to learning as much as possible from as many sources as possible, right? Uh, I think one thing that a lot of people don't do well, and this is me, the pot calling the kettle black here, because I didn't do this well for a long time. Still think there are plenty of times where I don't, but I'm trying to get better at it, is I don't go into certain situations or I don't hear people from a certain perspective of open mindedness to where my learning capability from said situation or said person gets cut off to an extent, right? Um, and I've kind of come to the conclusion at this point in my life that I want to learn as much as possible, especially about given situations before I make any conclusions about anything or make up my own mind or opinions about anything. Because I feel like it's my civil duty as a person in general to not jump to conclusions in the sense of I'm just going to make my mind up about this, given the little tiny bit of information I have, and just go from there.
Mm.
Because I see a lot of that in today's world, and I don't think that's great. I think that's a big problem in today's world in general. So learning, constant learning, and open-mindedness would be another big one for me outside of having the patience of not coming to conclusions so quickly, which I mean, I guess all in all, the two kind of go hand in hand in a lot of ways. So,
Yeah. So when you think about patience and the open-minded learning, how do you then teach your 17-year-old students those two things?
yeah, that's the big question, right? That's the big
Mm.
question. And again, it's very situational, it's very individualized. But I mean, I think in general, first it starts with the relationship they have with me. And that
Mm.
goes back again, I won't go down this rabbit hole again, but that goes back to the trust aspect, right? They have to be able to trust me in order for me to properly pour into them. Relationships are everything in every job, every scenario, every conversation, every friendship, whatever. Relationships are everything. I truly believe every single good thing is built off of strong, trustworthy, and healthy relationships.
Mm.
Um, and so when it comes to teaching my athletes these things that I wish I would have had or possessed or known at their age, such as patience and open-minded learning, I think it comes down to the fact that do they see that in me now and do they trust me enough to be able to use me as an example to lead by, right?
Mm.
Because those aren't necessarily qualities you can be like, all right, here's the step by step process in order to be patient, right? Here's the step by step process in order to have an open mind and learn everything that you possibly can and receive all the information that you possibly can. That's not a thing, right? There's not a class for that. There's not a lesson for that. It's not a page out of a textbook, right? But what can happen is if an athlete comes to me struggling, I'll give an example I had not that long ago, right? I had an athlete, very hardworking athlete, doesn't give me any issues, always does everything to full extent. I mean, he's one of my favorite athletes to work with in the entire school, right? He came to me about a week ago and he was like, Coach, he came to me privately, right? Uh, wasn't in a team setting, in a group setting. He was like, Coach, we were about to work out. He was like, Coach, I'm just going to be honest with you. I'm not feeling well today. Like, I'm just not. Like, I'm sore. I'm hurting. Like, normally I can push through this, but today I just don't think I can. Like, I really just don't think I can. Like, I'm just really, really struggling physically and mentally today. Like, I'm just down.
Mm.
And because that's an athlete who I know is telling me the truth, and because he has that relationship with me to where he feels like he can trust me with that information, and I'm not going to get upset, and I'm not going to get mad, and I'm going to be understanding of that, right? We were able to work together, and he left that workout that day feeling better than when he came in. And it wasn't because I told him to push through it and get over it, right? Because this is what he signed up for or whatever, right? It was because I made enough adjustments for him to feel good leaving that workout, because the adjustments I made in his workout are adjustments that I know would not make him strain so much, but would actually leave his soreness feeling a little bit better, leave his tightness, his whatever he had going on, feeling a little bit better. So his
Mm,
physical feeling better is going to help his mental feeling better, right? And so things like that are what's going to open up to them seeing me in a different light. And I'm trying to teach them by leading by example. Okay, I just showed them patience. I just showed them open mindedness. I'm hoping that they see that and can use that trait and carry that trait to their own life when they get approached in a situation like that, because it's going to happen, right? It may not happen today, tomorrow, or next year, but it's going to happen at some point. And I hope that because they've been treated this way and they have felt this way based off the good treatment that they've received through those qualities of patience and open mindedness, that they're going to be able to apply that to themselves too. But again,
mm,
it's not a step by step process. The only way I know how to do it, and please, if anyone knows any different ways, by all means tell me, because I'm not an expert at this in any way. But uh, leading by example is the best thing that I can come up with at this point. So
Yeah, I would argue that safety, where your student felt accepted and
hmm
believed, I would argue that that probably made him feel better even before the workout,
yeah,
because it came to a point where a lot of his feeling of dread was that I don't feel good and now I'm going to have to go do something that's hard. But
yeah,
you pretty much took away the hard, and so honestly, he probably started feeling better even before you gave him a new workout.
hmm yeah, yeah. And this is why this is great, Keegan, because I didn't even think about it in that way.
mm.
So I hope you're right. I hope you're right, because that's great if that's the case.
Last question for you, what is the most important life lesson you've learned so far?
Oh man, you and these loaded questions, man. Goodness, the most important life lesson I've learned so far. Hmm.
I like to keep it broad. I like to
You
keep it
do like
broad.
to keep it broad. You do like to keep it broad. Hey, I appreciate it. I appreciate it. The most important life lesson. Okay. This is the first one that came to mind. That's one of those questions I'd really have to sit and think on to come up with
Mm.
the dead set most important thing. You didn't send me these questions beforehand, or else I might have been able to do that for you, Keegan. But that's fine. But this is the first thing that came to the front of my mind, so it's got to be at least up there. It's got to be important. But the thing that came to mind was you can't control every single thing. Um,
Mm.
I've alluded to the fact that I've always been a pretty big worrier in my life, and that's always led to me trying to somewhat micromanage my own life. I kind of pride myself in not micromanaging other people that much. That's not really an issue for me, but I do try to micromanage myself and control every single situation that I'm in, almost to a fault. Um, because the fact of the matter is, I can't. I can't control every single situation. I've really struggled throughout my life putting the utmost trust and faith in God in a lot of situations. And I'm trying to get better about it. Still not good at it. There's a lot of things I've mentioned in this podcast that I'm trying to be good at, but I'm not yet.
Mm.
Just full transparency, and I don't mind that. I don't mind being fully transparent. But uh, I think that's a big life lesson that I've learned over the past, especially the past 3-ish, 4-ish years, is there are some things that no matter how hard I try or what I do, or whether I think I do the best I possibly can, there's some things I can't control. They're just not in my control. I can only do what I can do, and that's it. And that hurts my pride a little bit sometimes. That hurts my ego a little bit sometimes. It hurts my feelings sometimes. But
Mm.
It's something I've come across time and time again over the past few years, and it seems to keep speaking to me in some way, and in a lot of different aspects of my life. And so I think that's it. I think that's it. And it's a life lesson that I haven't learned yet. I'm still in the process of learning. Let's put it that way.
Mm.
So maybe that's not quite the answer you wanted, but because I'm still trying. I'm still trying to get there with the whole learning process with that, and figure it all out. But that's definitely a big one for me.
Yeah, maybe another important lesson is that you're still learning.
Yeah,
Like understanding that you're never going to be a finished product is
yeah.
important too.
Yeah, well, I'll give you a subtle plug here, Keegan, because you are obviously a pretty good therapist because you're making me see a lot
Yeah,
of sides to things that I haven't previously seen before because I didn't
yeah,
think about it that way either. So I appreciate that encouragement because that's a good one. That's a good one. So plug to Keegan there. Go
yeah.
go talk to him. He might do you some good.
Yeah, I'll accept payment right after this. Don't worry.
Oh, I appreciate it. I
Uh,
appreciate it. Yeah.
so what parting thoughts do you have?
Yeah, I mean, I've enjoyed this time. I appreciate you having me on. It really is. It's an honor and privilege to be on the podcast with you.
Mm.
I know we're friends and I know we talk a lot, but that doesn't make me feel less honored and privileged to be asked to be on here.
Mm.
So I really appreciate you, and I think you're doing a great thing here, and I'm excited to listen to who else you have on. Hopefully, they're a little bit smarter than me.
Well, I was disappointed when I asked you what your hobbies and interests were outside of work, and you didn't mention our other podcast we have together. But that's fine.
Oh,
That's fine.
that's
I'll plug it
true.
in here.
That
He
is
decided
true.
not to.
That is true.
All
Yeah, no, go listen to In Season the Dynasty Pod with Blaine and Keegan, where we talk about everything there is to do about Dynasty fantasy football. So I am your co-host for that show. So there's
Yeah.
that shameless plug right there. So
Yeah, this whole episode is actually an ad for that podcast. So,
I mean, I've painted myself in a pretty good light here. So if you want to hear more about me, just head over to that podcast. You can hear my voice as much as you want. So
amen. Amen. And that is Blaine's humility showing right there. Well, yeah, that's it for this episode. Yeah, like Blaine said, I'll be having some other people on for interviews, but Blaine, thanks for joining. I thoroughly enjoyed this, and hopefully others enjoyed as well.
thank you, Keegan.
All right, see you later, man.